Australian Aviation Podcast, the official podcast of Australian Aviation, unpacking the latest insights, developments and issues impacting Australia's aviation sector.
Hello everybody, my name is Adam Thorne and welcome to the Australian Aviation Podcast, the show where we talk a little bit about aviation and a lot of nonsense. Joining me as ever is my co-host, the king of nonsense, Jake Nelson. Jake, how are you?
I'm not a monarchist, Adam. I'd consider myself more of a president of nonsense.
Well, actually, that's a good link here because I got in trouble from my colleague Emily for not giving her a shout out on the last episode, so I'm going to do it here. She is French, as the name would suggest. I don't understand.
We don't hold it against her.
Well, I do, and I also don't understand a word she says because she doesn't speak the King's English properly. Anyway, she got me a birthday present, which was both very thoughtful and quite vicious as well, which is basically the best type of present. For those of you watching on the YouTube, I will attempt to show you probably want to see. It is a Harry and Meghan commemorative cup, like royal cup, and it actually shows the moment they kissed at the royal wedding. Paid for, I should say, by my taxpayer pounds. This is a very thoughtful gift, savage, but I really like it, and now I always drink my tea from this mug.
Yeah, the royals do a lot of big events paid for by your taxpayer pounds, Adam.
No, I mean because I don't get into details, but basically they make us
just so many things that the royals spend a whole bunch of money on that probably don't need a whole lot of money spent on. Do you really need the royals anymore?
No, they're your royals as well. But the worst thing is that you get the joy of them.
I didn't vote for them.
You get the joy of them, but you obviously aren't paying anything for them. So that's why I think if anything you should be forced to contribute.
Listen, supreme executive power is derived from a mandate from the masses, not from some farcical aquatic ceremony.
Oh, shut up. Anyway, right, next shout out we're going to do, and I've got another 2 shout outs. These are going to work together. This is really good. Do you remember that guy that used to work on the show, Jordan the Great?
Jordan the Great.
So he worked with us as like a kind of video producer. But before that, he used to say he was a professional athlete. That was rubbish. He was a professional sportsman, and he played water polo or water volleyball or whatever it was. And so he did that for years. I mean, he left that to come work here. But he has recently been moonlighting as a coach, and he coaches young girls. And this team that he coaches this week, they are having the national championships in WA. So he's taken the team to WA. So it's like a football team. He's like the manager, right?
Yeah.
And I saw him for coffee last week, and he was telling me how he did this inspirational speech to them.
Sure.
And it was trying to rally them up. This is the biggest moment of your lives. You prepared really hard. Make sure you enjoy it. All that kind of stuff. So the tournament, I think, is currently ongoing at the moment as we record this. Almost certainly by the time this comes out, they probably would have been knocked out and failed but they could still be in it. So if you are, and he does actually watch every episode, if you are watching Miss Jordan the Great, best of luck with this.
It's a really inspiring story because they were the bottom team in the league. They had no chance. Raggedy old uniforms, right? They were practicing in a vacant lot, and that vacant lot was going to be turned into condos. So what can you do? But Jordan came along.
He did.
He came along. He overcame his crippling alcoholism, and he brought these girls from the bottom of the league right to the top. He brought them together as a team and told them to believe in themselves. And now this is the greatest moment of their lives. They're going to be facing off against the snooty rich kid team.
Yeah, they will be. Yeah. They will be.
And they do have, I believe, a secret weapon, which is a dog. Because ain't no rule that says that a dog can't play.
Can you have a dog in a swimming? Because it's a bit at swimming pools.
Ain't no rule says a dog can't play water polo, Adam.
Right.
It's I don't see it in the rule book. So they've got the dog, and the dog will be playing water polo with them. And with any luck, Waterbud will help them win the tournament and save their practice ground from being turned into condos by the snooty rich kids.
This would be a really good Disney Plus movie. I don't think you release it in cinemas, but you get it on the streaming service. Well, to the dog and to Jordan, best of luck in your water polo competition, and I will find out how they did, and I'll do an update next week. On that note,
it's a vacant lot. It's not even a pool. They have to swim in the dirt. That's how badly off they are.
Right, yeah, anyway, so we got rid of Jordan the Great left, and then we've had a number of replacements. We've got Jacob Appending.
Yep.
As people know, all of the people that work on this show in some capacity, they're given nicknames. Mm-hmm. We now today have a new video audio person, Paddy. Paddy's in the studio right now. Mm-hmm. Paddy doesn't know we were going to do this shout out. I've literally said about 2 things to him, so he probably think this is pretty weird. But we've got a new member of a team. Welcome to the team. Have you got a nickname for Paddy?
Don't start. This is how we got Jacob the Pending.
Yeah, I know, that was funny, but you can't, you can have a week's grace, right? But we can't have 2 pendings.
Adam, you're trying to force it again. You're trying to force it again. You know what happens when you try to force it.
Yeah,
you get Jacob the Pending.
Well,
don't try to force it.
Yeah, okay.
Happens organically.
Anyway, welcome to the show, and we will have you a nickname by the next week. Have I got any more shout-outs? You've actually got shout-outs, haven't you? You've got very good ones.
Do you remember, Adam, Hayden McDonald, the young autistic pilot who did this epic circumnavigation of Australia more than a year ago now in his Jabiru J120 in order to educate people on autism and campaign for greater fairness and inclusion for people on the autism spectrum and for neurodivergent people in aviation through his organization Wings Without Barriers. Now, Hayden has moved to Sydney and he reached out to us saying he's got, we have a significant fleet of aircraft models here. And Hayden reached out to us saying, could I loan you one of my custom-made models for about 6 months? He said he's just moved to New South Wales. He doesn't have enough space. He's looking for a bigger apartment, too sentimental to sell, and he thinks it would serve a better purpose being displayed in the studio. So we said, yes, absolutely. We'd love to have your model in the studio. This is it.
It's really good as well. It's the best one we've got.
It is an excellent model made by Factory Direct Models, and it is a Jabiru J120, a light sports aircraft like the one that Hayden used to fly around Australia. We've got a note from Hayden as well. He says it's a light sport aircraft that's built in Australia. It's almost a one-to-one replica of the livery I fly and the cockpit too. He says, I hope it will make the dark and gloomy studio a bit brighter and keep the vents clean.
Well, that's really kind. Hayden, thank you very much for that. It's a really thoughtful, nice thing to do. You actually did a podcast with Hayden. You did a couple of podcasts, actually.
Yes, we did 2 podcasts with Hayden, one before he left and one after he came back. And we did a feature in the Australian Aviation magazine several issues ago. Hayden has his own YouTube channel. So Google Wings Without Barriers. You will find Hayden's website and his YouTube channel. The logo, of course, for Wings Without Barriers also is here for those watching on YouTube. Shout out to Hayden. We will take very good care of this model until you are ready to reclaim it. And the gigantic case that it came in.
It was very big.
It was very large.
Yeah, and it just turned up at the office.
I was able to achieve my dream of dramatically turning 2 separate locks on a case, flipping it up and opening it.
Yeah. And as a man of musical theatre, that's the sort of thing you would do very, very well. Yeah, no, thank you very much for that. Have we got any other shout-outs, or should we steam into the news? No, we do. Sorry, I just interrupted you. We do, because we need to talk about, I need to look at the camera for this, the Australian Aviation Awards. So
very
they are
important.
Very important. They are launching on Tuesday, so we've obviously got the long weekend. So same deal as we've done the years before. If you are an individual or you're an organisation, you can enter. Go on our website and it's got the full list, or it will do on Tuesday, the full list of like categories that you can get involved in. Really, really worth having a go. And as I always say, like my tip to you is the more effort you can put into your entry, the better, because it's not like the Oscars. Like we weren't with you for your entire career. We can't know the ins and outs. So we're reliant on you giving as much detail as possible, as much evidence as possible. But yeah, if you want to go and look on Tuesday, if you look on Tuesday, even you've got weeks or months or whatever it is to get all your application stuff ready. It all culminates in a fancy pants, flashy black tie dinner in Sydney a few months later. So it's well worth entering. It's well worth coming along. If you yourself don't want to enter personally, you can nominate somebody else. And basically what this means is if you nominate somebody, they get sent an email that says that somebody's nominated you. So if you think there's anybody anybody you think is a worthy candidate, go and do that. But we would love to have you enter. We'd love to have you along. It is a really, really good night. And it's weird because it's an industry that's so sort of spread out around the country. There aren't that many opportunities for everyone to kind of get together and celebrate. So it is a really, really cool thing to do.
What are some of the big categories?
Like we've got ones for like pilots. We've got one for organizations. Pretty much every single role in aviation, there will be a category you can enter. And obviously you can enter multiple categories as well. So it might be the case that you want to enter like the rising star or the older category.
Or the young aviator of the year.
Yeah, exactly. So there's a multiple categories you can enter as well for yourself, for your team. We tinker with the categories a little bit each year, but it'll be broadly the same as last year. So go in there. You can have a look at the terms and conditions and everything. Get stuck in. Right, yeah, should we steam into the news?
We should steam into the news.
Let's steam into the news. Now, I would say that Jake can come across as a blithering idiot. However, secretly...
And often does.
And often does, yeah. Jenny from HR, if you can't even have a go at me because he's backed me up. However, annoyingly, he is incredibly talented, and Jake got 2 phenomenal exclusives in 2 days, 2 of the biggest stories of the year in the industry. He is exceptionally talented journalist. These actually probably have been 2 of the biggest stories of the last few weeks as well. We're going to start off by talking about a big development at Bonza. So obviously, as everybody knows, Bonza went under last year. After it was only going for in the end just over a year. There was a lot of controversy in terms of its demise, because essentially its backers, 777 partners, effectively stopped giving them money, and this is what caused the kind of a spiral of events where things went wrong. And it culminated in this day when the airport lessors effectively reclaimed the aircraft. So Bonza found itself as an airline without any aircraft in a click of the finger, which obviously caused lots of problems for the passengers there. They weren't able to turn the situation around. Now, previously, in the kind of liquidators report or the administrators report, they basically said that there was some evidence, or they thought there's evidence of potential kind of foul play by the directors, which could have potentially included the Australian directors, and it could have included the US directors. And so we have had a big development on that, Jake. Take it away.
Yeah, so ASIC, the corporate regulator, confirmed to us. So we got this news first. I think the ABC picked it up afterwards. But they've confirmed that Bonza's Australian and US-based directors have been sent what are called no further action letters. And so what this means is that essentially ASIC will not proceed to any enforcement action against them. They are, for the moment at least, closing the book and drawing a line under the whole thing. Now, ASIC says, and this is kind of boilerplate, but ASIC says that this is not a finding that there was no wrongdoing. What it is they don't have enough evidence to suggest that there was wrongdoing, or at least not enough evidence to make pursuing this worthwhile. So whether or not there was wrongdoing doesn't matter at this stage, unless there is new evidence. ASIC is not going after the directors.
And I would say that I'm really pleased with this, in the sense that it means that the 2 kind of Australian directors at Bonza, to an extent that they can draw a line under this and kind of get on with their lives and then get on with their careers. And I would say that I did feel, I don't want to even say incredibly sorry, but I really did feel for Tim Jordan, the CEO, who was always very gracious with his time with us, always very open and honest. There's very little nonsense. I think Bonza as an idea was exceptional, and I think that actually it worked a lot better than the critics gave it. The critics said after it went under. One of the sort of major problems is, or the biggest problem is that they were being effectively underwritten by 777 partners, and they needed to be underwritten for 777 partners probably for at least another 6 months. And that doesn't necessarily mean they had a bad business plan, but obviously when you launch an airline, you need to grow your fleet. That takes a lot of time. You need to grow your brand. So it was never going to be the case that they were going to launch and instantly be making a lot of money. It was always going to be the case that it was going to take a couple of years for them to find their feet. And kind of what happened is the backers sort of pulled out before they got to that point. Now, a lot of people in the industry might say, well, they were always doomed. It was a terrible idea. But I think the evidence we saw was actually it was a good idea, that they were getting passengers on those aircraft. And also it was a different idea for people that are unaware. The kind of a concept was, it was what they called called like point-to-point travel. So effectively, it meant you either fly from a holiday destination to a holiday destination, or you fly from a capital city airport to a holiday destination in another state. So these were unusual routes, and the majority of their routes were never flown before. So they were attracting new customers and new business effectively to the aviation sector that just wasn't there before. This idea has worked quite a lot. I think, you obviously get it in the US, you effectively get it in Europe as well. Everybody said for years and years and years it would never work in Australia. I think they were beginning to make that work, and it is a crying shame that they went under, because we've lost those routes. We've lost that business. There's
been a couple of routes that have been picked up by Jetstar, but a lot of those Bonza routes have gone and have not yet come back. Now, Tim Jordan, the CEO of Bonza, did give a statement to the ABC after our story broke. The ABC sort of also picked that up. Tim said in his statement, quote, "While the recent news from ASIC of no further action is certainly welcome, it doesn't unfortunately change the sad outcome of Bonza's demise in late April of last year, or the subsequent negative impacts on communities, customers, suppliers, and the former Bonza team." Yeah,
exactly. And I would say that when this all happened, and when this all sort of Bonza kind of effectively started to go under, when they had their aircraft sort of taken off them, he was the one that fronted up. He was the one that fronted up and spoke to all of the employees. He was the one that took that flak. You could make a very good argument in terms of apportioning blame. It was 777 partners who, whatever the legalities of it, but it was 777 partners that made, I would say, those bad business decisions. They, I don't believe, have even released any real kind of public statement at all.
And it was the administrators, Hall Chadwick, did point out in their report to the creditors that Tim Jordan and the CFO Lydia Valenzuela, the two Australian-based directors, were fully cooperating with the administrators, and were helping the administrators, whereas the US-based directors were not.
Yeah, and it comes across from the outside, and we don't know the ins and outs. It comes across that they didn't really care at all. But credit to Tim, credit to that Bonza team. I think they were genuinely good people. They were genuinely trying to do something good, and it's a difficult thing to go through, because you must have imagined that Tim has had this kind of year from how, because this has all happened kind of outside of his knowledge. Like, one day you're the CEO of an airline, it's your idea, which is your baby. The next minute you've lost everything. They had this ASIC investigation or whatever kind of hanging over them. At least now there's an element that he can kind of get on with his life and draw a line under it, because I know that they have to have a due process, but these things, they linger on and on and on, and it's not fair that him and a lot of those people at Bonza, their lives were kind of in a freeze. So I'm glad for him.
And from what we've heard from our sources, and this includes we covered this last year, the maintenance and repair company that was servicing Bonza, and we've heard from other sources that sort of had knowledge of all this, that Bonza was this close, apparently, to getting an Australian buyer, getting out from under 777 partners, and being able to continue on. So if it had been just a little longer, then the problem would have solved itself. And I mean, as well, if it had just been a little longer, like a couple of months, you really have to feel for Bonza. Bonza gets its planes taken off, and what was it, at the end of April? Not 3 months later, bang, down goes Rex.
Yep.
And suddenly they're swimming in 737s. There's 10 737s to spare. That would have more than doubled their fleet.
Yeah, it was very unfortunate. I think the thing that kind of annoys me is that the media narrative and the mainstream media was this was a terrible idea. It would never work. I think that's rubbish. The information we had from our sources, from Bonza as well, was that this was rubbish. And I kind of feel that the story is wrong, and it's almost a sad ending. Whether it would ever happen, I don't know. But I would love to see Tim come back with Bonza, or come back and try again, or somebody else do this, because I think they proved a lot of people wrong, and it's always a shame for an industry when this happens. We've spoken a lot on the show as well about how the ACCC have said, rather obviously maybe, but the more competition you have, the better. The more airlines you have on a route, the more prices go down, the more it helps the whole industry. To have lost, effectively two out of our 4 airlines is has been a disaster. So we spoke there a little bit of the first of two. You got Jake,
that.
Yeah, I got there, of Jake's exclusives. He's had another one as well. Jake, talk us a little bit about what else you've got this week.
Yeah, so this came to us originally through the Australian Services Union. They put out a press release end of last week, basically criticising Qantas for looking to outsource its baggage handling at the new Western Sydney airport. Now, that's not the story. That was a press release. We did cover that. But while I was looking into this, I got a statement from Qantas, and it mentioned in the statement, QantasLink and Jetstar will be operating from Western Sydney Airport at launch, and that kind of made me think, now hang on, QantasLink, because when back in 2023, there was this big announcement made that Qantas and Jetstar would be the first two airlines operating out of Western Sydney Airport. And I went back and checked, and it did say Qantas. But it was confirmed to me by Qantas that it would not be Qantas Domestic that is launching out of Western Sydney Airport. It is QantasLink, the regional arm. And I think it later got revealed to Executive Traveller as well that this would be using QantasLink E190s, apparently, out of Western Sydney. And so I went and I covered this. What Qantas has, basically the Qantas kind of policy or the Qantas tactic is that when they say Qantas, oftentimes they are talking in general about all of these QF-coded red tail services, which includes both Qantas Domestic and QantasLink. And so what they've said to us is it was always, when we said Qantas, we meant red tail. That includes QantasLink as well. It will be QantasLink and Jetstar initially operating out of Western Sydney, Qantas Domestic to possibly come later. You can imagine it would come later.
Yeah, and I don't want to be too mean to them because probably, and who knows what the actual truth is, but I would imagine when they made that announcement, they said Qantas and they didn't necessarily know what the makeup would be. So I don't want to sort of accuse them of like trying to be incredibly sly. But nonetheless, if you say it's Qantas and Jetstar, people will rightly or wrongly assume that means Qantas Domestic. So then it's initially going to be QantasLink is a very different offering. Now, and again, we don't know, and in fact, Qantas don't necessarily know now exactly what the makeup that will be, what routes they will offer, and what aircraft they will fly. But I think what we can say pretty much for certain, that's going to mean smaller aircraft. It doesn't mean they're sort of larger 737s.
Yeah.
It's likely...
Or A321 XLRs.
Yeah, exactly. And it's likely to mean that Qantas itself, in terms of the main brand, will not be flying a capital city to capital city major routes. These are going to be QantasLink style routes. So effectively a capital city to a smaller destination.
Now, that could be, for example, the Gold Coast.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, there's no reason that perhaps they couldn't, use a larger aircraft or, operate one of those kind of traditional routes, even though it is a bit more unlikely. Now, nonetheless, though, it is still a blow to Western Sydney. They will have Jetstar as well, but nonetheless, to launch a new airport, the first big international airport in Australia in God knows how long, and not have your flag carrier, their main brand there, is a blow to them. Now, I imagine over time that will be sorted out. But nonetheless, there's no dressing it up. That is going to be a bit of a blow. We're still a long way. We're still at 18 months or so off it opening. At the moment, this is a story that only the industry will talk about. But nonetheless, it will be a story in 18 months' time. People will say, why can't we get Qantas domestic flights to Western Sydney? So it is going to be a bit of a blow to that. It's not. That's not a great narrative for them.
Yeah. Back in 23, Qantas Group said that it was planning to operate up to 15 narrow-body aircraft, which would be 10 Jetstar and 5 Qantas planes. So we can presume that these Jetstar planes will be the A320s or, the A320neos or the A321, the whole A320 family over there. With the Qantas planes, from what Executive Traveller seems to have been told by Qantas it would be Embraer E190s.
Yeah.
So that would seem to be the makeup at the moment. Now, Qantas Freight will also be operating from Western Sydney Airport, and you will have Singapore Airlines as an international carrier. They will be flying into Western Sydney. One presumes that Virgin Australia will sign on at some point between now and when the airport opens, because it would be a big market for Virgin Australia. Nothing out of Virgin on Western Sydney yet, but you can assume that they will, that if they are not already in talks, they will be.
Yeah, you would assume that they would be there. The kind of the complication is obviously if you want to launch new routes, you need more aircraft, or you need to take aircraft from somewhere else. That will be the kind of juggling act. As well, nobody really knows how much demand or not we will have for Western Sydney, particularly at first. It's going to be a bit of a staggered start. I'm sure the fancy pants, number crunchers at the airlines are kind of making guesses, but having it with it not existing yet, they're only going to be able to guess. So I think what you probably will see is that I think you will have Virgin there very, very early on. I reckon it's going to be a similar almost to a Bonza situation in that you will see routes chop and change quite a lot until people work out how they're going to be able to make this work. But nonetheless, yeah, it is a big news.
Look, and we've got an idea that presumably Jetstar will be flying Melbourne and Brisbane. We don't. The Gold Coast was also mentioned back in 2023 as a destination for Qantas Group. Not sure if Gold Coast would be Qantas Link or if it would be Jetstar or if it would be both. And I suppose there would also be nothing stopping Qantas Link from going to Melbourne and Brisbane with its E190s. So we will have to see. But that's the situation. It will be Qantas Link flying out of Western Sydney when the airport opens, not Qantas Domestic.
And of course you heard that from Australian Aviation first. So
you did.
Simple flight.
I presume that Qantas International would also want to go out of Western Sydney.
Yeah. All right. What are we going to chat about next?
On the subject of Virgin, a bit of a snafu as far as they work. A snafu. Situation normal, all effed up.
Is that actually what it stands for?
That's what it stands for. Yeah, right. A bit of a snafu, bit of a boo boo. Virgin has announced that it is refunding around 61,000 passengers for essentially getting their itinerary change fees wrong.
Yeah.
This is in some instances between 21st of April 2020 and 31st of March 2025. It was only about 0.1% of bookings made during that period.
Yeah.
So what happened was there was some technical issues in relevant systems that determined booking change fees, and as a result, customers were overcharged, and they will be getting refunds averaging about $55. And Virgin has, turned all this over to Deloitte. Deloitte will be handling the claims process. Claims will be open for up to 12 months. Amounts that guests elect not to claim will be donated to charity. Virgin says, look, we told the ACCC proactively. We're going to work with the ACCC on anything else that is needed. We are very sorry.
Yeah, and I would say that the way they've handled this is very good. I remember I think I heard about this because the Sydney Morning Herald sent out a notification as if this was some kind of big scandal. I don't think that's very fair. Clearly, it does seem to me that there was an honest mistake. I can barely use my laptop. Something's gone wrong with the technology somewhere. And they've found this out. They've worked it out. They put their hands up. They're reimbursing people. They've kind of used Deloitte. So there's an element of independence there, or they're going a bit of a third party to help. So I kind of think they've handled that very well. You compare that, and they would obviously been influenced by this, but this kind of similar situation that Qantas had with these kind of ghost flights, which they didn't in any way handle anywhere near as well. So I kind of think Virgin have looked at that, and there's lessons have been learned. But nonetheless, it's quite good if you get like $50 in your bank account or whatever.
Yeah,
that's all right.
Yeah, and it's as you say, Adam, honest mistake, and they have gotten out on the front foot and made the effort here. So slap on the wrist for making the mistake in the first place, but good job, Virgin, for moving so quickly to fix it.
Yeah, there you go. Right, we're going to talk about next.
So we had from the ATSB, Adam, over the past week, the final report into the SeaWorld helicopter crash in January 2023. And that has what that basically found was that there was this perfect storm of things that there is an analogy used of like slices of Swiss cheese. And the holes in the Swiss cheese, appear in different places. And if all the holes line up in exactly the wrong way, then you have an accident.
Yeah, so in aviation, effectively, the concept is that they have backup after backup after backup after backup. So it's not just that they don't want incidents to happen in the first place. They're almost actively planning for an incident and what's going to be the fail-safe, and then what's the fail-safe after that. And that is the reason why aviation is so safe in the most general sense. Most aircraft can fly perfectly well with one engine. That they can fly perfectly well with no engines, they can glide. So that's a whole mentality of the industry. And so effectively what this report has said is a very unfortunate set of things happened that kind of perfectly lined up and caused this.
Yeah, so there were 28 findings from this ATSB report. Firstly, there was the operator kind of SeaWorld helicopters, they made changes in the months beforehand to improve the tourism product. So they commissioned the use of a second helipad location or the park pad. They brought in these new EC-130 helicopters, the kind that was involved in the accident. They brought in new hangar and office facilities. Now, according to the ATSB, over time, all of these changes undermined the risk controls that they used to manage the separation between their helicopters. And they created what Angus Mitchell, the chief commissioner, described as a conflict point between launching and departing helicopters, which is where they collided. So that the safety management system, according to the ATSB, did not effectively manage the risks that were present in the operation. And when numerous changes were introduced, processes were not implemented to consider whether they would affect overall safety. So that's the first thing that went wrong, is that the operator brought in all these changes to make the tourism product better, but did not adequately consider the safety risks. Now, on the day, there was a problem with the radio on VHXKQ, which was the outbound helicopter, the departing helicopter. So what happens on the day before we get to that radio is VHXH9, the helicopter that was coming in, they radio ahead, but VHXKQ was loading passengers at the time and did not register the call. Now, the ATSB says that a member of the ground crew said, you're clear to take off. But by the time XKQ took off, more than 20 seconds later, this advice was no longer accurate as XH9 was coming into land. There was also a problem with visibility. There was restrictions on maneuvering at the park pad, and the angles of closure of these two helicopters limited the visibility for the departing pilot to identify the helicopter that was coming in. And Michael James, who was the pilot of the helicopter that survived the crash, did mention as well he did not see that the other helicopter was taking off. And there was a visibility study that the ATSB conducted and found that both pilots would have had a limited view of each other in the lead up to the collision. Now, there was a system of radio calls and hand signals and visibility devices that should have alerted pilots that another helicopter was coming, but that system had significant flaws. In addition, we bring the radio antenna. Apparently, there was a defective radio. The radio antenna on VHXKQ, the departing helicopter, was faulty. And so while a taxiing call may have been made, it was not broadcast. And so Michael James, the incoming pilot, who was focusing on the landing site, did not have any cause to reassess, this helicopter is taking off and is a collision risk. So what the ATSB has said, and this is from Angus Mitchell, quote, "This dependency highlights that aviation operations should have multiple safety defenses in place and not be vulnerable to single points of failure, such as faulty radios or a pilot's ability to detect another helicopter in a visually constrained environment." So essentially what the ATSB has said is a string of things went wrong and all of those things lined up to cause this crash.
Yeah, and it was very unfortunate and it was a very tragic incident. Obviously, it was tragic for the people that died, but also because this happened happened effectively on the kind of the main Gold Coast beach, right, there would have been an awful lot of families that would have seen this happen as well. So it was obviously a very distressing thing for everybody involved in it.
And to be clear, the ATSB here absolutely now the name of the pilot that was coming in, Michael James, is known, but the ATSB has praised him in the past for saying that his remarkable maneuver meant that a far worse situation was averted. So his helicopter, he survived the accident, and I think all of the people on board his helicopter survived the accident. The people on the other helicopter were killed. There were injuries on his helicopter, but the loss of life was averted, went on his one. And 4 of those surviving passengers on his helicopter released a statement hailing him as a hero. He tragically passed away last year in June from cancer. So Michael James prevented a much worse loss of life. Now, according to the ATSB, by the way, SeaWorld helicopters have since taken a number of safety actions following the disaster. The introduction of a pad boss, which is a new ground staff position to provide pilots with traffic advisory information. A map display in the helicopters to display the positional information of other aircraft using ADS-B new radio call protocols, fitting the helicopters with strobe lighting and high visibility paint on the main rotor blades to make them easier to see. And there's an old saw in aviation, Adam, which says that every accident makes aviation safer. And, you know, these measures that have been brought in now kind of go towards that. Accidents should never happen, but every time there is an accident, the work of investigators like the ATSB or the NTSB over in the States or any other investigator around the world make sure that the next accident either does not happen or is not nearly as bad as it could have been. Yeah,
exactly. So the ATSB, who are our kind of air crash investigators effectively, they have this sort of philosophy that almost like a no-blame report. Yeah. It's not a court. They're not saying this person did something wrong or that person did something wrong. The entire point of doing this is to prevent accidents happening in the future. It also, like when you hear what is it, 28 recommendations or 28 kind of
28 findings.
28 findings, right? People, I almost think people don't understand the amount of time and effort that goes into these reports. You know, this would have been like 2.5 years or something in the making. Was it just 2?
Yeah. It's been about. So it was January 2023. It's been...
So it's 2 and a bit years, whatever, in the making. This would have been a team of people that have kind of, you know, gone into excruciating levels of detail in order to find out exactly what happened. And it wouldn't have been easy as well. The people that work for the ATSB are so insanely talented because they have to have a knowledge of flying. They have to have a knowledge of human factors. They have to have a knowledge of the mechanics of an aircraft. They have to have all of this breadth of knowledge, and they're extremely talented people. The reports they produce, some of them go on, they're like hundreds of pages. They go on and on into meticulous levels of detail. But the work they do is really, really important because of the findings they make, like you said there, will make things a lot safer.
Well, this was a bit of an odd story that came out of Western Australia.
It would be out there.
Yeah, it would be. Lovely place, Western Australia. Was there earlier this year. But a 12-year-old boy somehow managed to purchase a Jetstar ticket to Adelaide in January. And then last week, I think, disappeared from his home in Leederville and turned up safe and well in Adelaide. Why he wanted to go to Adelaide, I'm not sure.
Ouch.
Well, we don't know his motives, Adam, but apparently this kid did. He got a Jetstar ticket, showed up at the airport. He had all of the relevant documentation. He needed to fly as a young person traveling alone. And so he was let on board the plane and flew to Adelaide.
So the controversy from the mainstream kind of media on this is, you know, how could this ever happen? How could a young kid do this? But actually, it's not without precedent that these things happen. Am I right in saying that there are actually a series of rules that mean that young people can travel on their own? I think Jetstar's argument is that they wouldn't necessarily have known, and all of the kind of the regulations or the law, not necessarily laws, but everything was kind of followed.
Yeah, all of Jetstar's policies where he had the documentation that he needed. For a young passenger 12 years or over, you need to prove your age. You need to that can be proof of enrollment in secondary school. Anyone 12 years and over is generally required to be enrolled in secondary school. So he had the correct documentation.
He was well on the ball, this kid. That's what I like about this.
All 12-year-olds can travel independently on domestic flights, provided they can show that they are attending or enrolled in secondary school. They don't need a parent or guardian to be present at check-in, as long as they have all of the documentation. This is for domestic flights. Now, when a minor looks to board an international flight, yes, a parent or guardian does need to be present. If no parent or guardian is present at check-in and the staff has reason to believe the young passenger may not have permission for a parent or guardian to travel alone, the young passenger may be refused check-in on an international flight until permission to travel alone can be confirmed. And Jetstar says, as you say, thousands of young people travel on the flights every year under the YPTA policy, which is the same as those of other airlines, including Virgin.
Yeah, I mean, but the thing is, on the surface, when you kind of first hear about it, you think, oh, that's shocking, this young person got a flight. But, we're a continent country. If he'd have got a bus or a coach or a train, there wouldn't be the kind of uproar. It's a continent country. People need to travel all the time. There may be situations, I'm not saying this is the case. Maybe you have a divorced couple and they have a son and one lives in one city and one lives in another city. It would be absurd for them to have somebody, an adult with them for this. Obviously they need to be able to do this. Also, he was 12. This is not like a 4-year-old. 12-year-olds are perfectly capable of doing this. So there's this kind of almost like this sort of outrage. Yeah. But nonetheless, these things, this is, like I say, it's a very common thing. It would also be slightly wrong if you were to take away that right of young people to be able to travel on their own. What I love more about the kind of rat-like cunning of this young lad, he's right, so he's gone there, he's worked out what all the rules are, he's got all the right documentation, snuck up onto the flight. What a legend. I love this.
Yeah, no, I'm more impressed than anything.
Yeah.
It's not to encourage that kind of behaviour, but that is impressive.
Yeah, Jetstar did nothing wrong. That kid, you're a legend. Right, you probably got time to
Don't do it again.
Do it.
This should not be taken as an endorsement of your behaviour.
Endorsing it.
Stay in school. Stay in school.
Whatever. I think you're a legend. We probably got time for one more story.
Yeah, so this is a bit of a historic story. Qantas has marked 60 years since its first commercial jet service to New Zealand.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, so this was 10th of April 1965, and it was flown by VHEBL, which was with their Boeing 707V jet. The first ever commercial flight across the Tasman with a jet aircraft. Now, this was Sydney to Christchurch. Previously, Trans-Tasman trips had been served by Lockheed Electra propeller planes. Before that, Short's Empire flying boats, which had 15 seats and could fly between Sydney and Auckland in about 9 hours.
9 hours?
9 hours. You can fly to Perth today in less than half that time, which is that's 3 times the length of today's flights from Sydney to New Zealand. But this was first time anyone had ever flown a jet across the Tasman. Over 10,000 people came to Christchurch Airport to welcome that service.
10,000 people?
10,000 people came to Christchurch
Airport. That's bigger than like the Beatles,
Airport.
Isn't it?
Yeah, it just goes to show you how amazing aviation is. Qantas founder Sir Hudson Fysh and Lady Fysh were on board that inaugural service. It was commanded by Chief Pilot Line Operations Captain Torchy Uran.
What a great name.
Great name.
Yeah.
Or possibly Uran. I'm not sure how to pronounce that last name. Sorry, Torchy, if you're listening and still with us. And New Zealand-born cabin crew members Bob Bishop, Alan Williams and Alan Gill, as well as Anne Claydon from Littleton in Christchurch. Today, of course, the Qantas Group operates 360 flights across the Tasman every week on 737s, 787s, A320s, A330s. But this was the first time they did it, and that was 60 years ago last week. If you're wondering, by the way, if you're not up on your history, and I can't imagine why you wouldn't be, you're listening to the Australian Aviation Podcast. But for those who might not be in the know, the reason it was called a V-Jet was because this was one of the Qantas' 707s that was fitted with a turbofan engine as opposed to the older turbojet engines. And so V-jet from vanus, meaning fan in Latin. Now, Qantas in 1979 retired its last 707, and today the VH-EBL registration belongs to a 16-year-old A330-200 in the airline's Pride livery.
Now, people say this show's all a load of nonsense, but that was really good. Like, that is next level knowledge and trivia you gave people there.
Well, they never say we don't do anything nice for you.
There you go. And on that note, on that perfect note where we've showed off our knowledge, we'll probably wrap things up. Jake, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Adam.
And we will be back on this show the same time next week. But for now, from me and Jake, goodbye.
Goodbye.